If you guys have any tax and accounting questions now that it's towards the end of the year, any of you guys that are entrepreneurs that might have a few questions, how should I handle identity theft? Probably report that. And if they screwed up your credit, then you could reach out to us for some credit repair. We own 60-day credit repair, so we could take care of you in that regard. If there's anything on there that needs to be removed, we should be able to help. I need to know about loopholes. What you guys need to understand is there aren't loopholes. It's just tax code, Should I stay with an LLC or switch to an s-corp at the end of tax season? Should they stay an LLC or switch to an s-corp at the end of tax season? What's the major difference? Go ahead.
It depends on a few factors. You mainly need to look at your profit for the end of the year and make that determination. There's a little bit of calculation that comes into it. Depends on which state you're in as well. Generally, you're looking 60,000 plus in profit before it makes sense to switch to an LLC. The major difference
switch to an S-corp.
Or switch to an S-corp, sorry. Yeah. And the major difference is profits of an S-corp are not taxed with SE tax rates, but LLCs are.
You can't talk like that. With SE tax rates.
Self-employment tax.
There you go. You got to be, not everyone knows what
so
you mean.
LLCs get taxed with income tax and self-employment tax. S-corps don't pay self-employment tax on the profits, but you are required to pay a reasonable salary, which is where the $60,000 in profit essentially would go for a reasonable owner salary.
What are some write-offs that aren't usually used when they can be used?
I see a lot of people not utilizing home office or taking depreciation when mileage is higher on vehicles. Other ones are cell phones. If you use your cell phone, I see that one a lot. Internet at your home office as well. Different utilities. A lot of people just don't think you can take a percentage of your cell phone for a business write-off, which you absolutely can. It's a little bit harder to necessarily prove, but you can allocate 30% of your telephone bill if you use your cell phone 30% of the time for business and 70% for personal. So those are some very common ones.
Also, just so that you guys know as well, a pretty cool hack for the end of the year, if you've had a really, really, really good year, you can actually prepay things in December for the following year. So for instance, if you have rent, and your rent's $5,000 a month or whatever it is for your business, let's say for instance you're like, shit, this is going to put me in a high tax bracket, I'm making a lot of money this year. You could look at what your rent is the following year and say, okay, I'm paying $5,000 a month for 12 months, and you can cut a check for $60,000 in December and prepay the following year's rent, but you'll get the deduction for this year. The only issue with that is the following year, you're not going to have that same deduction because you prepaid the whole year, so you won't have that expense for rent. So the idea is, we know that business goes up and down, right? You're going to have good years, you'll have bad years. That's just the way it is when you're an entrepreneur. And so the idea is, again, the following year, you would do the exact same thing so that you still get that rent deduction that year, just prepay ahead. And then if you have a bad year, and you don't need to worry about, maximizing deductions, then at that point, that would be a good year not to utilize that rent write-off, so to speak. So is it easier to have one brokerage for stocks or maybe just a couple to keep things minimalist?
For taxes, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They provide statements, so it just depends on fees, maybe.
Nifty tax codes. Okay, so I'll share a couple things with you guys. I think that we've already talked about some of this stuff. So you guys can actually, for business meetings, you can rent your home to your corporation tax-free. Tell them a little bit about how that works, Jared, just so that they're familiar with that rule.
So you would rent your home to your LLC or corporation or your business essentially for any meeting or activities or whatever the case is at fair market value of whatever the rental rate of your house is. And if you rent it for less than 14 days, you don't have to actually claim the rental income, but you can take the rental expense on the business.
Somebody said, I'm a sole proprietor. Should I turn into an LLC? So King Fred the Great, just so that you understand, an LLC is taxed the exact same as a sole proprietor. So the tax benefits, there is none. going from a sole proprietor to an LLC, right? The only difference is an LLC gives you more protection. It creates separation from you and the business. A sole proprietor means you're running everything through your Social Security, basically, which puts you in a scenario where you can be exposed to liability if you get sued, whether it's on the job or you get into a fender bender and somebody sues you because of a car accident and you own a business and you're a sole proprietor. That means your personal assets and your business assets are now up for grabs. So it just depends on, the type of lifestyle that you live. If you live a wild and crazy lifestyle, you might want to have an LLC to protect yourself. But again, tax benefits, there are none between a sole proprietor versus an LLC. So can I give myself a W-2?
As an S-corp, yes.
Yes.
As an LLC, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll still have it. Should I tie in my binary options trading earnings into my taxes? I was told I didn't have to claim it if I didn't withdraw it.
Yeah, I mean, it only becomes taxable when you distribute, right, or sell, right? Otherwise, it's an unrealized gain.
Do all businesses need an LLC to file taxes?
No. No, you can file partnership without an LLC, or sole proprietors file without, official documentation or anything like that.
Wondering what the average percentage of net income entrepreneurs pay when making 30 to 60K. I feel like I'm paying way more in taxes than I should. Again, that just depends. What you need to realize is if somebody's making 60 grand, let's say you make 60 and I make 60, but my accountant's better than your accountant. My adjusted gross income, in other words, my income after expenses, might be better than yours because I'm using more strategies. I'm writing off my vehicle. I'm writing off a portion of my mortgage for home office. I'm writing off my cell phone bill. I'm paying my kids up to 12 grand per year, tax free for the child and for yourself. You're doing the Augusta rule. The Augusta rule is what we just talked about, which is where you're renting your house back to your corporation. So for instance, if you had a business meeting and you wanted to rent out a room in the Marriott hotel for a business meeting and they charge $2,000 for that, instead of paying Marriott, you can actually handwrite yourself a check out of your business to yourself. And then on the bottom, you would just go ahead and put, what would they put? Augusta rule or just rent for event, something like that. And so that $2,000 that just went from the business account to your account because you rented your own home to your corporation now is tax-free because it falls under what's called the Augusta rule. If you don't know what that is, you might want to look it up.
And to follow up on that, remember you have income tax and self-employment tax on that amount. So that's why it might seem higher because you might just be looking at what your income tax rate is and not thinking about the other 7.65% or 7.85% on top of that.
So this dude, Fred, again, said the sole proprietor, he's getting more established. Should he convert to an LLC? Now, if you want to send us a direct message after this, you can. And we can go ahead and talk to you a little bit about that. I would say yes, but you may want to elect to have your LLC taxed as an S-corp if you're making over 60 grand a year from your business. And if you're doing contract work, I would guess that you're probably making, more than 50, 60 grand a year from your business. And so an S-corp might be your best bet, but, we would need a little bit more information from that. But would I start establishing yourself, as more of a traditional business through an LLC or an S-corp? Absolutely, I would. Eventually you have to draw a line in the sand and treat your business as such. You have to treat it like a business if you want it to be a business. So a lot of people do a sole proprietor just to start, just to see if something works on a side hustle, but eventually it's going to work out of a side hustle and into more of a business. And if you're running it as a business, you should treat it as a business and definitely set up an LLC. The real question is whether you should remain as an LLC and be taxed as an LLC, or whether we should have that LLC taxed as an S-corp for additional tax benefits. If you're in a bind from not getting your taxes done in a few years, is it better to see an accountant or an attorney? That's a good question.
An accountant first, once you file, and then the IRS responds with fees and penalties and interest, then maybe that's when you talk to an attorney, or the accountant can help you with an offer and compromise, whatever the situation is. Yeah,
there was somebody that reached out to us yesterday that owed 80 grand in back taxes and said, hey, I want to try to settle this for less than what I owe. And so I sent that individual, that lady, a referral to an individual that we know. What's he in California?
Yeah.
Anthem Tax or something like that. How do gains from stock markets work when doing taxes? That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Yeah,
So
I like that.
when you sell a stock, you'll recognize the gain depending on how long you've held the stock. If it's less than a year, you get taxed at ordinary tax rates that we're used to on all sources of income.
So let me elaborate on that because he's an accountant and I'm a human being. In other words, I'm the idiot and I like to dumb things down to make it make sense. So what he's basically stating here is in the first 12 months, let's say you bought Tesla stock in January and you held on to it for 11 months and you sold it. That's inside of 12-month time frame. So what happens, let's say you made 10 grand, again, that's just an example on that stock. And let's say you made 100 grand that year at personal income. So now your personal income is $110,000. So you'll get taxed at whatever your tax rate is on $110,000. So it just converts to ordinary income. That's what he meant when he's saying ordinary income. It just adds to your current income that you already have. Now, if you hold a stock for longer than 12 months and then you execute a sale, it doesn't convert over to ordinary income where you're taxed at whatever tax rate you currently pay with your income. It's taxed at a capital gains tax, okay, which in some cases is far better than your ordinary income tax, right? So let's say, for instance, an individual like myself that's at the highest tax bracket, and if I'm paying 35-40% in taxes, if I sell and it moves over to my ordinary income, now I'm paying 35 to 40% tax on the money I made inside that stock inside of the 12 months. If I hang on to it for 13 months, then execute the sale and I made 50 grand, now I only have to pay capital gains tax on the 50. It doesn't convert to my ordinary income at 40% tax, okay? So what happens with that is you're hit at anywhere from a 15 to 20% capital gains tax, which is much cheaper than paying the 40% tax bracket that I'm in, right? So it really just depends on where your tax bracket is, but you're not going to get really any cheaper than 15%, even on ordinary income if you only make 50 grand a year or whatever it is. So keeping it and holding that stock, not executing a sale for at least 12 months, you'll actually pay less in taxes on the capital gains side of things. So when people say capital gains tax, they look at it as a bad thing, but in reality, capital gains tax is usually less than your ordinary income tax. So that's how the stock market works. Oh my God, Jared, I'm your biggest fan. We love you, Caitlin. We hope you're doing well. Any trucking company advice? Yeah, buy a shit ton of trucks and just keep running and gunning, bro. Keep running and gunning. A lot of people think that there's a lot of ins and outs with different industries, and there's really not. There's a few industries where there's a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, what people need to understand is a business that has an LLC or s-corp, it's money coming in and money going out, right? It's going to all flow back to you as the owner. So all of the things that we just talked about, like taking, again, a portion of your home office, your vehicles, your cell phone, letting your kids work for the company, paying them $1,000 a month, which is 12 grand a year, that takes 12 grand off of your tax liability, converts it over to your child, then you can have your child start paying their own expenses, like for sports or any school supplies, clothes, vacations, or whatever it is. So they're kind of paying their own way and you're getting that tax free. So should I send tax in with a check or wait for the bill to be sent for me with the IRS? Another good question.
Yeah, I would pay it as soon as you can, because that will stop any further interest or penalties. Mm-hmm. And then if there are any leftover interest or penalties, they will send you the bill for that remaining amount, but it will stop any further penalties or interest once it's paid. So try to pay it as soon as you can.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Once they're sending you bills, that means that there's usually late fees and interest that's accruing. So let's say, for instance, in April I want to file my taxes, but my business deadline's not till September or something like that. September 15th for my was it my s-corp?
Yeah,
is that right?
Partnerships.
So let's say, for instance, I'm going to owe an additional 50 grand. I'm not going to wait till September to cut a check to the IRS for 50 grand, because now I could be paying interest from April all the way till September on the liability, right? And so if I cut that check for 50 grand, and again, you should be working with your accountant. Your accountant should say, okay, I have all the data from last year. This is about what you're going to owe after we take all of your expenses. You cut them a check right then and there so that you're not paying that interest and you're not paying the penalties. Never wait for the IRS, to reach out to you, because usually that's not a good thing. Yeah, should I put my vehicles in my LLC name or personal name? I'm a one-man general contractor.
Doesn't matter. You'll just pay like different fees to transfer it, but you can treat it as a company truck, essentially. You can still take the mileage, still take the expenses without it being in the LLC's name. So it doesn't really matter.
Who do I got to talk to for R&D tax deduction for my startup? All expenses are research, developed, focus. Does that mean I don't have to pay taxes? LOL. It doesn't mean that you don't have to pay taxes. So how an R&D tax credit works for research and development, and again, with research and development, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a lab coat on and developing something crazy. So let's say, for instance, you're developing an app for your company. That's a new thing for your business that you had to research and that you had to develop. Let's say you're creating a CRM or a system for your company. That's also goes towards the R&D tax credit. So it's not a deduction. So you've got those two things mixed up. So a deduction is something that ultimately basically goes against your income. A credit is money that's just given back to you. So for instance, if I spend $100,000 on a new CRM for my company, I can submit that information stating, hey, I paid $100 grand for this in order to increase my revenue as a business, or whatever it is, enhance my business. And they could look at that and say, okay, we'll give you $100,000 tax credit. And then you get a large refund check after the fact. But you have to actually file your taxes first. And then once the taxes are filed on that and you pay your tax, then you take that tax return, you can hand it over to an individual that deals with tax credits. They ask you a series of anywhere from like 15 to 20 questions, get to know exactly what you did, what you spent money on to develop something new in your business. And then they take that information and your tax return, and then they go to the IRS and say, hey, we think that this qualifies for the R&D tax credit. And then that's when you start lining your pockets with some of that money. When should a company become an S-corp? Usually when you're around $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in personal income that you're making from the business. Would you agree with that? Yeah, somewhere right around there. So if you're right around 50, 60, you're going to want to reach out to us, or reach out to an accounting firm or the accountant that you currently work with, and start entertaining that conversation. Say, hey, is it a right time for me to elect becoming an S-corp? And I do want to highlight something for you guys real quick that's on here. Now, if you have an LLC, the only time that you can elect to be an S-corp is in the first 75 days of each year, or the first 75 days that LLC was set up. So let's say, for instance, somebody makes $100 grand this year and they want to hurry and switch over to an S-corp, and they've had that LLC for 2 years. It's probably not going to happen. So on January 1st, you'll want your accountant, or in January, February, to elect to have your LLC taxed as an S-corp, so that following year you get that S-corp benefit. How partnership taxes with two partners? I don't know what type of
profit gets allocated to both partners at whatever level they're at. Income tax, SE tax on their individual returns.
How do they become an S-corp? What's the form?
File form 2553 with the IRS.
So you can literally Google form
2553
on Google and literally just print out that form from the IRS and fill it out. It should take 5 minutes?
Yeah
it's like it's very, very simple. So I'll tell you this much, a lot of accounting firms make pretty decent money for 5 minutes and charging you, $500 or something like that to elect your LLC to be taxed as an S-corp. But it literally takes like 5 minutes of time. It's something you could definitely do yourself. But again, I always recommend, having an accountant look at your situation just to make sure that an S-corp, one, is right for you. And secondly, that you're making sure that you're paying the fair and reasonable salaries on that. Does it make sense to pay you, the owner, weekly in an S-corp with no employees? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So all the IRS wants to see is there was a payroll ran in that S-corp. So let's say, for instance, you have an S-corp and there's no payroll throughout the year, and they can flat out see that. That's one of the first things that could be audited, right? So S-corp, no payroll, audit, right? And so you could even run one payroll each year. I wouldn't recommend it. It's easier just to do it like once a month.
I'd do quarterly. At
or-
least
or-
quarterly,
or
just so
quarterly.
quarterlies get filed. And then that keeps the IRS off your back even further.
But yeah, I mean, if it's literally, if you're an S-corp and you haven't ran payroll at all this year, you can run like a $20,000 payroll in December, and it'll at least have that payroll on your tax return stating you're an S-corp, and it'll remove your probability of being audited. Does it make sense to pay? Yeah, okay. I made close to 400 for the first time last year, but as a sole proprietor, it taxed me 42K. Wish I knew better. Yeah, it happens, man. It happens. I hope you made some adjustments, so that you don't continue to get, murdered with taxes. What's the biggest tax advantage that you have learned from being a business owner that really isn't common knowledge? That's we've kind of gone over a couple of those. Common knowledge is a lot of people don't know that they can pay their children. And I think they can pay family members as well. Any family member, up to $12,000 per year tax free. So you're not having to match taxes on that $12,000. You're not having to pay tax on that 12 grand. So that's a good one, because if you've got 3 children and you pay each child $1,000 a month to do simple duties in your business, that's $36,000 a year that you're not paying taxes on. And if you're at a 30% tax bracket, you start doing the math. There's $10,000-$12,000 in savings on roughly that $36,000. Thanks for addressing my question. Do you recommend any tax accounts? Yeah, Easier Accounting, Michelle. I highly recommend those guys. If you haven't checked them out, they're amazing. So look into them, or you can simply send us a direct message, because we happen to own that company. Question: having an associate's degree in accounting and office systems is good?
I need a little bit more info. Good for certain positions, bad for others. It depends on the role.
It depends on what you're trying to accomplish, what you're doing, right? Are you starting your own business and just going to do basic, bookkeeping? It's fine. If you're going to go try to, be a CPA or do higher level tax returns, probably not. You'll probably struggle a little bit more on some of the more difficult tax returns. That's why Jared has a master's degree in accounting, right? So he's in the process of studying to get a CPA license as well. My brother, the jumper business is 5 of us at 20% each, pretty much LLC. Should he have 5 partners, 20% each under an LLC?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, it wouldn't. I don't think it really matters.
Makes more sense.
Could they switch over to an S-corp at one point?
Yeah.
The only problem with that is now they're having to pay a fair and reasonable salary to 5 different people.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be
So
good
instead
at that
of
point.
$60K, it'd be really like $300K to pay everybody a reasonable salary at that point.
Just went through a divorce and I'm trying to get up on my feet, opening a barbershop. Should I open the barbershop as an LLC for an S-corp to be able to give myself weekly checks?
I'd start with an LLC first. I wouldn't switch to the S-corp necessarily from the jump, depending on which state you're in. Some states it makes more sense to, but as an LLC, you can still take money from the company and live off of that without it being a W-2 wage, right? So you don't need to pay your wage to actually pay yourself. So you could do either or, but I wouldn't necessarily just jump to the S-corp. I'd probably maybe 1 or 2 years into it when the profit's there, because there's other costs that come into it, the payroll, the other filings that come into it. So, but you can take money out of the company as an LLC and be fine and live off of that without a W-2 with it.
I own 100% of my business. Single member LLC. Is switching to an S-corp or anything else necessary? It just depends on how much you make, man. But again, if you make over 50 grand a year, 60 grand a year from that LLC, I would definitely look into having your LLC taxed as an S-corp starting in January or February. Again, you've got January 1st through March 15th each year in order to have your LLC filed as an S-corp, right? So you get to keep an LLC is great because it provides a lot of protection, but the S-corp has better tax benefits, right? So you're not having to pay what's called self-employment tax. Self-employment tax is what? 15.3%. So on $100,000, let's say, guys, and you have an LLC and you make $100,000 from your business versus making $100,000 through an s-corp, you're probably talking about on average what, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 per year in savings easily just by switching the entity type, right? So it's quite a bit when you start getting up into those higher numbers, $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, right? How do real estate agents pay their taxes off the money they make? They're considered or known as a sole proprietor. So they're able to take advantage of all the same tax deductions as an LLC. A sole proprietor and an LLC have the exact same tax advantages. So any tax codes on loans and in debt in general, aside from interest on them as a deduction? No, it's just the interest. Yeah. Was listening to episode 41 on the... Appreciate that. Other than gifting your child, it's not gifting, okay? So it says, other than gifting your children $12,000 a year, is there any additional similar write-offs? It's not a gift. That's what you need to understand. You're actually putting them on, they're going to do duties for your business, whether they sweep, mop, take out trash, whether you take family pictures and you're a real estate agent and you use those family pictures to advertise that you're the best agent in the world because you have a beautiful family or whatever it is. You could pay them however you want to pay them, but there has to be something that they're doing for the business in order to have them on payroll. They do have to be paid through payroll, not as a gift. Can I write myself a check as an LLC?
Yeah.
Yes. That's the only way you can pay yourself as an LLC. Isn't that right? You can't
have a W-2.
You can't pay yourself. So if I own a business and I make, $300,000, I can't pay myself a salary or any sort of W-2 wages as an LLC. They all have to be paid as a dividend or a draw. In other words, cutting yourself a check. Can buying out another business be considered a tax write-off? Yes. So, for instance, if it's your same type of industry or business, so, landscaping or whatever it is, if I go absorb another landscape company, I'm expanding my business and it becomes a write-off. Now, if I take money from my current business and buy a different business in a whole different industry, I don't believe that that's a write-off.
Go to your basis.
That's what's known as your basis. So let's say, for instance, we've done this multiple times. We've took a couple $100,000 from one business and invested and started a new business. So what happens? I still have to pay money on that taxes on that $200,000. Okay, it goes over to this other business, and my basis in that business is now $200,000. What that means is I can now take up to $200,000 out of my business tax free because I already paid tax on it. So your basis is basically money that you've already paid taxes on. Or if I'm starting a business and I have no other business and I invest $25,000 to start my business, that's not a deduction to me. I now just use $25,000 to start a business that was already taxed on my personal income. So that $25,000 is now your basis, meaning you could take out up to $25,000 tax free. So when you take it back out, you're not getting hit with taxes. Now, what you guys need to realize is some accountants aren't really with it. Okay. So Jared, he went to Jared, right? I have a good buddy up in Salt Lake named Cam. This individual, he owns a funding company up there. Okay. So he reached out to us and said, man, I want you to take a look at my tax return. My accountant has me owing an additional $90,000 in taxes, and it just doesn't feel right. Jared took a look at it and got him a $110,000 tax refund. So literally that's a $200,000 swing. One accountant said you owe an extra $90,000. Jared got him $110,000 back. So it's a $200,000 difference. Now, how is that even possible? What happened is Cam invested a large amount of money to get his business going, and that was his basis. And so let's say he invested $500,000 to get the business going of his own money. That means he can take out $500,000 tax-free. The problem is he was taking money out of his business, and his accountant was labeling that as income rather than him just taking money back out that he already injected into his business. So he labeled it as income rather than his basis. And so now he was about to pay tax on money that he's already paid tax on that he invested into the business. So he's going to be double taxed. Jared caught that and basically saved him, $200,000 just on taking a look at his tax return. If I have 5 LLCs, should I elect to be an S-corp or just have one S-corp be a partner in the LLC? Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah,
Whoever you are,
that's a great
JW.
question.
HIDDIV. I don't even know what the hell that stands for, but that's probably one of the better questions that's been asked so far. So that's the same concept, or the same issue that I run into because I have so many different businesses. And so how we do it, let's say, for instance, you have those 5 LLCs, which is fine. You would want to set up an individual S-corp, just like you're talking about, okay? And then what you could do, let's say one business is going to pay you $10,000 that month as a dividend or draw. And what you can do is you could take that money from your LLC, shift it over to your S-corp, and just write for consulting. So now your S-corp is there just to consult with all of your businesses. And so your dividends and draws are now considered a consulting fee over to your S-corp. So you're flowing your money from these 5 LLCs over to this consulting S-corp that you have. Let's say, for instance, you make $100,000 a year off of each LLC. Now you have $100,000 in consulting fees on each LLC, which reduces the tax liability on those entities. It just shifts the money over here to the S-corp. And then on that one S-corp, you're paying yourself, let's say, $1,000 a week as a fair and reasonable salary. So that's $52,000 a year. And then the other $448,000 you're just taking as dividends or draws. But it's definitely reducing, some of your tax liability. How do I go from sole pro to a corp, or how do I get tax IDs? This is my first year in business as a sole pro. You may not need to, man. You may not need to. So, a lot of people just do sole proprietors because it's the fastest, easiest, cheapest way to just start a business. But you might not want to go from a sole proprietor to an S-corp, right? Right from the jump. Maybe you're only making $30,000 a year right now from your business. It may be best to go from a sole proprietor to an LLC. It just depends on the amount of money that your business is currently making as a sole proprietor that would determine whether or not we go to an LLC or whether we go to the S-corp election right off the bat. So how old do the children have to be? There's no stated age minimum on something like that. So, you could pay your 4 or 5-year-old if you wanted to. Again, if you're taking family pictures and you're using that family pictures as advertising for your real estate business or whatever it may be, if they're coming in and sitting with you for, a few hours each week and helping you, again, clean the office or whatever, we can always find things for the kids to do. And I think it's important for them to see, how money's made and be a part of that process so that they become financially literate. Does the family member who receives $12,000 pay taxes on that $12,000? No. What is that called?
They essentially have no.
So nobody in the United States pays any tax on the first $12,000 that they make. Is it 12? What is 12? What?
I think it's like 12.3 this year.
It's like 12. So if you've made $12,299, you pay zero tax. Okay. So the government's just saying, hey, your income is so low, we don't want you to pay any taxes. Okay. So deduction. It's basically considered the standard deduction. So they won't pay any taxes, and you're not paying any taxes because, again, they're underneath that 12,300 mark this year. And so that's how it works. What should you know about taxes after selling on Robinhood? Robinhood should give them.
They give you a form or a statement at the end of the year.
Yeah. So in January, I would guess probably before the 31st, just like you would with your employer, you get a was it W-2 or whatever, in that month, so that you can file taxes before April. Robinhood will do the same thing. They should be able to send you some sort of notification or email. They have your email when you set up the app, and you'll get your statements from there, so you don't have to sit there and try to figure out how much money you made. You would get one statement. You would hand that over to whoever's doing your taxes. They would look at the statement and see how many sales that you've made, how much money you've made or lost, and then do your taxes. Should a married couple in business together as a single member or multi-member? The husband invested the money, but wife runs it. I don't think that really matters.
Doesn't matter. All
Yeah.
goes to the same place ultimately. If you guys married filing joint, if
Yeah.
you're separate, that's different. Then you'd probably have to take a look at it and maybe do a partnership. But if you're joint, it's all ends up the same place.
Yeah, you take a draw on an LLC. That's right. I mean, that's the only thing you can do to pay yourself out of an LLC. How do I go from a sole pro to okay? So that's the same question as before. Dude, just send us a DM. Just literally right after this, just send us a DM, and we can guide you in that direction. It's really not difficult. We don't need to make it more difficult than it is. Starting a food truck business. Is it best to hire one employee or do most of the work myself starting off? That's not really a tax question, but more just a business question. If you can handle it yourself, do it. I'm telling you guys, too many people look for help or assistance too quick in the process. You need to carry as much weight as you possibly can for as long as you possibly can in order to make sure that the business has reserves. Right? If you don't have a lot of money, or if you do have a lot of money, maybe then it is good to hire an employee if you're not necessarily worried about the bottom line because you're already doing okay financially. When we start businesses now, we start businesses with full staff because we invest large amounts of money. We have large amounts of money to be able to support that staff. But when we first started, Jared remembers me back in my back office. I was doing customer support. I was doing sales. I was the manager, HR, hiring, fire. I mean, I was doing a shit ton of stuff on a day-to-day basis, just taking that weight on myself. And I carried that for probably 3, 4, 5 years, easy. Maybe longer. Could have been 6, 7, 8 years that I was doing all of that work. But that was the foundation that put us in a situation where we had enough money in the bank to be able to then start expanding and hiring on the support. So it just depends on what your goals are. Depends on how financially stable you are. If you can work the truck for a year or whatever it is, 6 months yourself, that's good, because again, you'll be able to put a decent amount of money in reserves. That's one thing a lot of entrepreneurs are terrible at, is making sure that there's 50 grand in reserves or 100 grand in their business bank account. Jared sees our business bank accounts. Do we keep a decent chunk of money in there?
Mm-hmm.
Is it 6 figures or 7 figures?
7.
7 figures. So our reserve is $1 million plus between our businesses. So, but that also allows us to continue to invest into new options as well. So when you have $1 million plus just sitting in a bank account, making sure one, the business is stable. Again, coronavirus hit. Did we foresee that? No, but we know that there's going to be issues. There's going to be things that will happen that are going to be outside of our control. So what can I control? Insulating myself from problems that I don't even know exist yet. And the best way to do that is by building reserves. And the best way to build reserves is by doing as much as you possibly can yourself. Pad the account so you got 20 grand, 30 grand, 50 grand in there. Then you can hire an employee. So if you have slow months, you don't have to let somebody go and then take over, and start doing everything yourself again. Just make sure that you're at the right point before you bring somebody else on, because you got to realize these are other people depending on a paycheck. There are other human beings that depend on you for employment. And so if you hire somebody on and the business hits a slow time for 2 or 3 months and you don't have reserves, sitting there in order to be able to float that, and you let somebody go, that's affecting other people. And I just, that's something that just doesn't sit well with me. Will it hurt me to own my business as a sole proprietor versus an LLC? Is that determine a yearly price? It's not going to hurt you at all, man. The only thing an LLC and a sole proprietor, the only difference is an LLC has more protection. So if you get sued, then somebody can't come in and touch your business assets when you have it sitting in an LLC. If you're a sole proprietor, they could take you and your business to the cleaners. So if you're worried about getting sued, or if you're in a high-risk industry, definitely set it up as an LLC. But tax-wise, an LLC and the sole proprietor has the exact same tax benefits. Can I switch the name to my LLC? So if you're running it as a sole proprietor, can you have your same name be the LLC name, potentially, if it's available? But you could also set up, what's your Instagram account? FitGBod. You could even set up FitGBod Enterprises LLC, doing business as, and then whatever you do business as, Trevor's Lawn Care, or whatever it is. So doing business as stands for, or DBA, That's what the public knows you as. The IRS knows you as your entity name. So some people do like Trevor Cowley Trucking LLC, doing business as Trevor Cowley Trucking. So sometimes the entity name matches what they do business as. But for instance, what's up, Jay? Do you want to come in here? Should you invest in multiple assets, businesses, if you have income to finance it? If you have the income to finance them? Yes, I would. So I had this question this morning, guys, on my way to work. I looked in the DMs and somebody said, hey, man, I own a business. I have 3 employees. Should I start taking money from my business, investing into stocks? And I says, it really just depends on where you're at. I would always continue to invest into the one thing that allows you to have the money to invest, right? So your business is the thing that's going to give you the ability to make 1, 2, 3, 4 other investments into different income streams, right? And so make sure that you have the initial source that you're pulling from is very, very strong. So if your business isn't that strong, continue to invest into the business to where you're cash flowing a lot, so much so that you can't. So one business that we have, makes a couple $100,000 a month profit, probably more than that. I'd have to get with this guy to tell me, probably makes, I would say, profits $2 to $3 million a year pretty easily. So what we do is we're not going to be able to invest $2 to $3 million back over and over into that business to scale it. It's got to the point where it's cash flowing so much, and we've continued to reinvest to where it's growing so rapidly. But now the cash flow is much stronger than what we need to invest to continue to see growth. So then we start taking money from that business, that overflow of money, and then creating new business ventures, new investments where we take it personally and then we'll personally invest in the stocks or whatever we individually want to invest in, right? We just invested into an Everbowl franchise, which is a acai bowl place. Does your company guide people with holding company and subsidiary companies?
Yes.
It just depends on if it's needed. Yeah. I mean, if it's absolutely needed, yes, that's what a tax plan is for. A tax plan will lay out, hey, look, you're making too much money under this entity. Here's how you're going to want to flow your money back to you in order to reduce your tax liability. Ink Labs, what's up, brother? What's up, brother? You're a good man, dude. My boy Richard right there. He's a good dude up there in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It's probably freaking ice cold there right now. What do you think about the minimum of amount of money you should be making for an S-corp? Again, before you look into an S-corp, you should be making at least about 50 grand a year or so from the business, right around that. The podcast is fire. Appreciate that. We'll keep doing our best to bring it. So my ex-wife and I have 50-50 primary rights, responsibility to children. If I pay my kids thousands of dollars a month, will she also be able to access those funds, yes or no? And how do I protect that money? Great question. You could set up your kids' bank accounts, and she doesn't have to be on that bank account. She doesn't even have to know it exists. So yeah, I mean, she doesn't have to have access to those funds at all. You are still the individual that's responsible for those children. So you will still be able to oversee that bank account and do what you want with it. So anything that involves you and involves an expense with your children, again, sporting activities, clothes, vacations, school supplies, whatever it is, you can then take the money out of their accounts and they could be paying their own way, but you're utilizing the deduction as well. Just make sure that they're doing something to help your business. Should I pursue an MBA?
It depends on what you want to do. Some job roles require it. Others, it could benefit you. And if you end up flipping burgers, it doesn't really matter, right? It depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be careful about investing too heavily into education. You got to make sure that, the education that you're investing in is something that is highly needed, right? And that you'll be able to find a job doing just that. What's up, Sean? So we've got Sean Henry right here, you guys. If you guys don't follow him, you oughta. He's a badass dude. And he's got basically the biggest solar company in the United States, if not one of the biggest. He's kicking ass and taking names. Love that guy. This is all really helpful. Thanks so much. You're welcome. Can you explain write-off and how it works? I hear a lot of people always say, just buy it and write it off. Yeah, you hear people that aren't accountants saying that. I'm guessing, right? Everybody's friend it just is great at. Um, Sorry, my phone's already about dead at 12 o'clock. Pretty par for the course. But yeah, you're probably getting advice from people who don't know what the hell they're talking about. Just buy it and write it off is really not a good strategy, because not everything that you purchase is going to be something that you'll be able to write off, right? Now, again, if you're talking about an expensive business vehicle, large vehicle, $80,000, that's cool because you get to write off 80 grand on your taxes, right? Or mileage, whichever's greater. Should we? What are some of the expenses of the business? Okay, we already hit all those. I think we're good. I think we've been in here for 50 minutes. My goal is to continue to go live with you guys a little bit more often. Try to bring you guys value however I possibly can. Just to kind of end it, off of the tax and accounting topic. I'm going to challenge you guys real quick, the 43 of you that are still on here, to create some non-negotiables for yourself. That's something that I wanted to highlight at one point or another. For you that are still sticking around, one, I appreciate you. So, I want to drop a little something on you guys. The fact is I would guess all 40 something of you guys on here don't have like legit non-negotiables, meaning that no matter what happens today, I will do X, right? So make sure that you have your non-negotiables. So for me, I have a weight that's non-negotiable for me. If I hit that number or go over that number, I start eating better and start hitting it a little bit harder on the cardio stuff. So I have non-negotiable weight requirements so that I don't just let myself go. Next thing you know, I'm 20 or 30 pounds overweight. And then at that point, now I'm having a bigger mountain to climb. So find some non-negotiables in terms of the weight. If you weigh 200 pounds and you like where you're at, make sure that your non-negotiable is 205. Once you hit 205, you have to start eating better and start exercising a little bit more to bring it back down to 200. That way you never have a large mountain to climb. Secondly, I would create some non-negotiables for the old dome piece, right? I'm going to read at least 10 pages a day for the next week. That's non-negotiable. I don't care what happens. That's something that I'm going to do. I'm going to listen to at least one podcast every single week, no matter what. That's a non-negotiable. Some of you guys need to create non-negotiables in your life that you follow through with. And if you don't do that, then you just kind of float through life. Next thing you know, you're in a bad situation. Then you have to climb out of that hole. Right? If you have these checks and balances of these non-negotiables that you live your life by, you're never going to get that deep into a hole because you're sticking to something that you need to stick to. So make sure that you guys are creating and thinking about some of those non-negotiables that you know that you should be doing. Because if you label it as a non-negotiable, you're more likely to actually follow through with it and get it done. Once I stated that I don't want to weigh more than 175 pounds, I hit 176 pounds, then I started 75 hard. Now I weigh 168 pounds. So I'm underneath that threshold of 175 pounds. And so I start doing things, boom, right when I see my weight go higher than I want to, I do something extreme. I challenge myself to basically grab the reins and control your life. And having a set of non-negotiables that help you control your life is something that can be a complete game changer. You wonder why you're not getting smarter, you're not getting more in shape, you're not getting income raises at work. Maybe your non-negotiable, if you show up 5 to 10 minutes late every day, is this week, the non-negotiable is I'm going to show up 5 minutes early every single day and honor that. Because then when you honor the non-negotiables, your confidence increases. You become an individual of value when you live by a set of values, right? So, yeah, get it done. Get it done, man. 75 hard is an incredible thing, and it's a beautiful thing, and you'll watch yourself grow mentally and watch your body follow suit. So your mind, wherever your mind is, it's a reflection right here, right? So if you don't have any control over it, you're probably a little bit of out of shape. You should be doing something a little bit more, but it's not because you don't want to. It's because you're not mentally fit. So 75 hard is a great thing to get you mentally fit. And when you're mentally fit, it shows up here. Okay. So anyways, appreciate you guys. You guys are all amazing. You guys are all wonderful. Wish you guys nothing but the best. Hope we weren't too scary on Friday the 13th. And if you guys have any individual tax and accounting questions, just send us a direct message. Or if you have any business questions, just send us a direct message. I answer 100% of them. So I'm here for you guys, and I'm here to serve. So wish you guys well. Kick ass on this Friday. Take care.